Way, way, way back, the ancient Greeks had a lot of time on their hands. When they weren't thinking of sneaky ways to fool the Trojans or inventing science, they busied themselves by tossing around some pretty neat ideas about governments. You may have heard of a guy named Aristotle. He was alive around 350 BC. Aristotle came up with a groovy idea called natural law. Aristotle's theory of natural law holds that society should be governed by certain ethical principles.
When we say ethical principles, we're talking about all the things you should or shouldn't do in society. Aristotle figured that it really wasn't right for a government to disrespect its citizens.
So, based on Aristotle's ethical principles, it wasn't right for a government to come in and take over a citizen's land or steal his leaning posts.
Aristotle's concept that governments should respect individual citizens was rather groundbreaking. But it was unfortunate for the citizens that Aristotle's principles didn't top the charts until centuries after their rockin' debut. After the Greeks and Aristotle, things were stagnant in government development for hundreds of years.
But then the 18th century rolled around and things really started hopping. A bunch of Europeans started making waves with some new revolutionary ideas. We call this period in history the Age of Enlightenment. It took place during the 1600s and 1700s.
Stop and listen!
During the Age of Enlightenment, philosophers and a handful of other smart folks went around encouraging people to seek alternatives to oppressive governments. Those governments that interfered with the personal rights of its citizens. Bad government, bad.
In response, heavy thinkers began to argue a new idea called popular consent. Popular consent asserts that people should be able to participate directly in the governing of their own societies.
One of those heavy thinkers we mentioned was John Locke. Locke took the idea of popular consent a step further and developed it into what is known as the social contract theory. The social contract theory compares the relationship between a society and its citizens to parties entering into a contract.
Basically, Locke argued that all individuals are naturally free. Therefore, people give their consent when they become members of a society. And if a society's government breaks this contract by acting improperly, then the people have the right to revolt. In fact, Locke said that not only do citizens have a right to revolt, they also have a duty to revolt. Pretty radical, huh?
And if a population rebels and breaks its contract with an ill-behaved government, they have the right to start a new, kinder, gentler government. And that's pretty much what happened here in America.
But first, the Founding Fathers still had some pretty tough decisions to make. The founders knew that a new government was needed, but what type should they choose? Well, let's find out about some of their options.